But Paul Bremer, who was the head of the Coalition Provisional Authority, used to show up with these pristine suits, and it was the scoop.
Clear, and we also know what is happening here in Georgia. The very people who don't want to shut down the state again, which nobody wants to shut down the state again, aren't doing the things to prevent that from happening, and masks are a major part of that. I mean, that's just the truth. Scientifically, politically, however you want to frame it, that's just the truth.
Sanjay, it's just so crazy. I mean, sometimes I just have to step back and look at this conversation that we're having. It's the easiest thing in the world. Putting on a mask is just the easiest thing in the world. Is it a minor inconvenience? Yeah, okay. But as we have pointed out, so is wearing a ventilator, so is going to the hospital, so is getting somebody you know sick. It's just the idea that this has become this heated political football where the governor is suing somebody and having press conferences and all of this. It's astonishing.
It's totally ridiculous, and it is going to be one of the worst legacies of this entire thing. I mean, Mayor Bottom just said it's politics over people. It's 100% politics over people. The president came here to Atlanta, was not wearing a mask when he came, despite the fact that there was an ordinance in place. The governor, instead of responding to that in some way, said, hey, look, I'm going to now sue the mayor of Atlanta for having put this ordinance in place. I mean, there is just one person that our governor, sadly, is trying to appeal to here, and it's really disturbing. And I work in the hospital system here. As I mentioned last hour, we are going to run into a situation again now in our hospital system where we may not be able to take care of the patients who need care aside from COVID patients, because there's going to be such a demand on the hospital system that they're going to turn into COVID hospitals again, primarily. So it's really ridiculous.
If you or a loved one regularly took Zantac and were later diagnosed with cancer, call right.
They show it for every state and every country in the nation. This is how you can determine hot spots. The blue part of the map is
Attorney General's office, and tell them about that connection with
things like
past still yet to
emit huge amounts of electromagnetic energy, which can affect our solar grids, our power grids, and all sorts of things, electromagnetic conversations. So it's pretty important to understand this. So this is really cool.
The important question is really, can you make s'mores on these cameras?
I knew it. I knew someone was making a s'mores joke.
Yes, you can.
Okay, good.
That's the Al we know.
That is the Al
full of facts.
every time.
Great conversation with the Chicks. They are name changed. Their comeback album. They're one of the most popular and polarizing bands.
You can't predict the future.
And you were emphatic about that. There's not been a mask mandate. I know you took a lot of criticism because of the Mount Rushmore event. Were there any breakouts after that?
No, actually, we're doing really good. We would start to see that a few days ago, and we continue to decline. I think what we did here in South Dakota is really remarkable because we gave people their freedom. We let the businesses stay open. We let people go to work. We told them to be smart. And we also asked them to be personally responsible, and we're seeing the benefits of that each and every day in South Dakota.
Sure, and I know that you were with us a couple of months ago talking about how what you were doing was you were protecting the vulnerable, people over 65, and anybody with a comorbid condition. But at the same time, there were spots in your state that were trouble. Some of the packing plants, meat packing plants were a problem, and so you addressed it that way. Rather than shut everything down, you were like a laser focusing on those.
We did. In fact, we, according to the national experts, did everything wrong. We did what the people on the ground saw. We aggressively addressed those situations and came out better for it. So I really think the people of South Dakota stepped up. They did the right thing, and they trusted me. I trusted them, and they made the right decision.
In addition to running the state of South Dakota, we've got some images of you over the weekend. You were at a professional bull riding event. It was the first major indoor sporting event with fans since March. How important was it to you that you would ride in bringing the flag?
Well, that was America. This was the first major sporting event indoors with spectators. They prayed before the event. They sang the national anthem. I was just proud to be there. This was a perfect example of what makes this country great. And these people are athletes. They wanted to do what they were good at. And it reminded all of us about how special this country is and how important our liberties are.
Yeah, indeed. And as we look at the COVID numbers, they are staggering. But if you had advice to other governors real quickly, what would you say?
Trust your people. Don't lay down mandates that are going to hinder the ability that they need to really get through this difficult time. Trust them, give them the facts, let them make decisions that are right for their families.
Indeed. All right. Governor, thank you very much for joining us today from South Dakota.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
All right. All right. Let's see. 8:56 now in New York City. Step aside. Right back.
This year, the Alzheimer's Association walked to...
So how long have you been looking at these numbers? Is there a way to see where the trends are going?
So this is only the second year that we have done this survey, so we can't quite talk about trends yet. But what is clear from both years of this survey is that the discrimination that LGBTQ young people face is serious, and that the political climate that LGBTQ young people have been experiencing is having a real impact on them. Our survey this year found that 86% of LGBTQ young people said that recent politics had a serious impact on their well-being. We know that there have been a number of discriminatory policies and laws that have been attacking LGBTQ youth. We know those policies harm LGBTQ young people, but we also know that words have an impact, and that when people in positions of power make statements and put out policies that suggest that LGBTQ young people are not deserving of respect, they hear that and it impacts the way that they think about their sense of self and their identity.
Hey, Amit, it's Willie Geist. Thanks for bringing us this research in your new survey. Let's be specific when you say leaders' rhetoric is impacting some of these numbers. What are we talking about here?
Well, there have been policies across the board at the federal level under the Trump administration. There have been a number of policies that have targeted LGBTQ youth, in particular trans and non-binary young people. In schools, the Department of Education rescinded guidance that would have allowed trans and non-binary young people to use the bathroom that corresponds with their gender identity. There have been, and we also know that some of those policies are at the state level as well. Idaho this year passed a ban that prevents trans and non-binary young people from participating in sports teams that correspond with their gender identity. So those policies have a direct impact on young people, but I also want to be really clear that it impacts their mental health when young people who are not on sport teams hear that. For example, the president tweeted in 2017 that trans people would be banned from the military. When that happened, the Trevor Project saw a significant increase in trans and non-binary young people reaching out for help. That wasn't necessarily because those young people wanted to join the military, but it's when people in positions of power say that you are worthy of discrimination, that sends a message to young people that they don't feel safe, that they don't feel supported. And so we really want to encourage all people in positions of power to be really careful with their words, because people are listening, and you don't have to be someone who is spreading messages of hate. If you spread messages of support and love and acceptance, that has an impact. Our research found that just having one accepting adult in an LGBTQ young person's life reduces their risk of suicide by 40%. That is an enormous number. And so we want to encourage policymakers and people in power to spread those messages of acceptance and love, not hate and division.
CEO and Executive Director of the Trevor Project, Amit Paley, thank you very much. We have just a few moments left this week, so time now for final thoughts. Kat?
And we're talking about at like the age of 6, the time that you might walk in there by yourself. I'm gonna walk in there by myself to buy a magazine or buy some candy, and literally what she said is, don't touch anything unless you plan to buy it. And that's a lot to put on a little kid when you just want to go out there and enjoy yourself. So yeah, it starts at the very beginning.
Well, thank you, Kamau, and to all of you. Be sure to watch the all-new season of United Shades of America. It's going to premiere Sunday night, 10 o'clock Eastern Time and Pacific.
Dressel, Sioux Falls.
One I know pretty.
84 months and 12 models.
today.
Good morning. New COVID cases in the U.S. now topping 70,000 in a single day for the first time. Texas and Florida face their deadliest days yet. The major testing setbacks, families waiting weeks for results. Dr. Fauci with a direct warning to young people crowding bars.
You're propagating a pandemic.
Too darn hot. The heat wave on the move into the Midwest and the Northeast this weekend. Ginger with the latest.
Money alert. Mortgage rates drop below 3% for the first time in 50 years. What you should know if you're buying or selling a home.
Daycare disaster. Is the industry on the brink of collapse? With centers closing left and right, parents left without child care, the push to get more funding, and what families everywhere need to know.
And get ready for Pet of the Week. Flippin and Kiko, 2 golden retrievers, 1 unforgettable bond.
Live in Times Square, this is GMA.
Good morning, America, on this Friday. We cannot wait to meet Watson and Kiko because they are our pets of the week.
That's exciting. Also, this is exciting. It is Friday, and that means we've got a new edition of Binge This. Great shows, music, and movies to start your weekend, including a special Friday morning. We're here. We got there. It's Friday. If you're just waking up, we say good morning. Glad you're with us. POTUS got the morning off. She's getting a little jump on the weekend.
She'll be back on Monday. You say Friday, I say Friday. And speaking of yay, take a look at the Monterey Plaza crowd. We got a couple in there, a couple in the mix there. They have a very big day ahead of them. We can't wait to share their story.
I know. I can't believe they're actually here on the plaza for what they're going to do a little later today. We'll tell you about that.
Up so early. Meanwhile, next week we have a really special series that we hope is going to be very helpful. It's called Pandemic Parenting.
Well, it's everything you need to know if you've got little ones running into your Zoom work calls, or maybe you've got teens or
from the dog.
And she said when they watched that video, she said, "You can take that shield with you anywhere." And he said, "I don't think that's a good idea."
Yes, I love this story. I love it. Brotherly love, nothing like it, I would imagine. We're going to begin with this. The fight against the coronavirus has had another major setback, with the U.S. shattering its record for daily cases. Johns Hopkins University researchers say more than 77,000 cases were reported yesterday alone, and that breaks the previous record set 1 week ago by nearly 9,500. Anthony?
It's also more than double the number of daily cases from April in the middle of the original COVID surge. Florida, Texas, and South Carolina also reported their highest daily death tolls of the pandemic yesterday.
Georgia Governor Brian Kemp is suing the Atlanta City Council and Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms to block the city's mask mandate. The suit claims the mayor overstepped her authority after Kemp issued an executive order Wednesday explicitly barring local governments from announcing mask requirements. There are at least 15 local governments in Georgia that have mandated face coverings. And Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms joins us now from Atlanta. She's been under quarantine at home after announcing she tested positive for the virus earlier this month. Mayor Bottoms, good morning to you. I want to jump right into this because your state is in the middle of a fight against a deadly virus and now also a fight between the governor and yourself. What's going on here?
It's really odd that the governor has filed this lawsuit on July 1st. The city of Savannah, through Mayor Johnson, instituted a mask order on July 8th. The governor's hometown of Athens, Georgia, instituted a mask order, but it was not until we instituted a mask order in Atlanta, and I pointed out that Donald Trump violated that order when he landed at our airport and did not wear a mask, that the governor filed suit against us. And so it is very clearly that the governor is putting politics over people. And I joined several mayors across our state who will continue to enforce our mask mandate. And we will have to fight the governor about this in court.
Are you saying that President Trump encouraged Governor Kemp to issue this lawsuit?
I can't speak to whatever conversations that they have, but I do know that our governor is a Trump loyalist, and he seems to work very hard to please the president of the United States, and that is often at the expense of the people in our state. And we've seen that. This is the same governor who said in the midst of this pandemic that he had just learned that this virus could be transmitted by asymptomatic transmission. And so even when he reopened the state, interestingly enough, he did not have the support of the president then, but certainly many of his policies are in lockstep with the White House.
So, Mayor, Governor Kemp has come around and he now says he, quote, strongly encourages residents to wear masks. Why do you have to go a step further and make them mandatory?
I can't speak to that because many of the governor's decisions as it relates to this virus have, quite frankly, just been illogical.
Mayor Bottoms, what I'm asking is why do you need to go a step further to make masks mandatory when the governor is already encouraging them?
Oh, the reason that we need to go a step further is because we need some consistency throughout our city. We have very high numbers in the city of Atlanta, and we have business owners who are saying that it would be helpful to them if there were consistency throughout the city. And quite frankly, it's very simple. Wearing a mask helps stop the spread of this virus. And so we will continue to do everything that we can do to make sure that people are safe. But ironically, even in this lawsuit challenging our mask mandate, he's also challenging advisory, voluntary recommendations that we have made to businesses in terms of reverting back to phase 1.
Yeah, well, he says you're confusing people. He also says that the mask mandate is unenforceable. You just had President Trump arrive and violate the mandate. How will you enforce it, and will you pursue that enforcement against the president himself?
Well, the way that we will enforce it is the way that we would enforce any city ordinance. Any city ordinance, you can issue a citation, you can give people a fine, and I'm not going to cite the president of the United States.
Why not,
I wanted to point out that well, one, he's not here now, so we can't give him a ticket if he's not in Atlanta. But it was to point out that he was violating the rules of our city and just a blatant disregard for the science. Right in our backyard, we have the CDC, we have Emory University that said wearing a mask will help stop the spread of this virus, and yet Governor Kemp went to a small university in our state to get the opinion that he wanted.
I think you could probably locate the president if you wanted to hand him that citation. But I'm curious about the perspective of businesses. The governor says he's bringing this lawsuit on behalf of businesses and people who are looking for jobs, want to stay employed. What's your response to that? Do you think the mandatory mask requirement and your rollback to phase 1 hurts the economy there in Georgia?
Absolutely not. Again, reading is fundamental. Our recommendations going back to phase 1 were advisory, voluntary recommendations. And so to be...
The White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany saying yesterday, look, science is on our side. It is perfectly safe, her words, to open schools. Just set the record straight on the science, because everything that I have read and every expert I've talked to said actually the science is just not there yet on how much children are vectors or spreaders of coronavirus. What we do know is every other virus like influenza, they spread a lot. What is the science? Is it perfectly clear?
No, there's still a lot of uncertainty about how much kids spread the virus. We haven't had as many children get sick, so we don't really know what will happen when we introduce an epidemic into school systems. We've seen some indicators from the rest of the world where there have been outbreaks in schools, but we're particularly worried about those teachers and staff members who may be older or have underlying conditions, who if they get sick, they may have severe consequences.
What about the delay in testing results? So we've heard some of the biggest labs out there, Quest Diagnostics, LabCorp, talk about this. We just heard the governor of Florida talk about this. If you have what we're seeing in some states is a delay of testing results, COVID testing results, from 5 to 7 days from when you take the test to when you actually get your result. I have a friend here in New York who took a test more than a week ago, hasn't gotten a result. What does that do to the nation's ability to get a handle on this crisis and really bring the numbers down? Because I don't think almost anyone stays inside and by themselves for a week waiting for results.
Yeah, it really hinders our ability to get control of these epidemics. As you said, if people who have symptoms who are waiting for a test are not indoors and trying to isolate, then they're out spreading it likely to others in the community. And we're certainly not able to trace contacts of cases and get those people quarantined without that information. It makes it really difficult.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Chris.
What the Chicks are saying about that time away from the spotlight, their comeback album, the decision to change their name, and we're going to get a special performance from the Grammy winners. But first, these messages.
Of dogs like Jack and the families who adopt them.
We can make precautions to make sure we don't, with good hygiene, with hand washing, masks where needed, those kind of things. But we've also got to have an environment which much of the mainstream media, especially on the left, seems to be advocating a shutdown. They seem to be advocating a society that lives in fear. And unfortunately, I believe sometimes a lot of that has to do with political leanings, that they believe this is bad for the president. And that's just what we're seeing. We've got to get back to honesty in our discussions on science and honesty in the discussion on how education should take place. We can do this safely. People just need to see that. But they also are getting scared all the time. They turn on a media outlet which says, the worst is near.
You mentioned masks there, and there's a dust-up over masks. The Governor Brian Kemp is suing the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, over her mandate for people to wear masks in public. She said about this, Georgians have died, and I and my family are amongst the 106,000 who tested positive for COVID-19. Meanwhile, I've been sued by Governor Kemp for a mask mandate. A better use of taxpayer money would be to expand testing and contact tracing. Congressman, what's wrong with the mask mandate? I mean, there are plenty of places across the country, including this bureau here, where we're being mandated to have a mask on before we walk in the door.
That's great. Private enterprise can do that, and that's where it needs to start. Businesses, and this governor has actually told people they need to wear masks. He's encouraged it. He's followed through on his own example of wearing a mask. What Mayor Bottoms is doing is auditioning for vice president. She has been talking about a waste of taxpayer dollars. Why doesn't she actually get involved with her Atlanta Police Department against a Fulton County DA who has actually charged police officers without a grand jury investigation, without actually having the Georgia Bureau of Investigation finish theirs? This is not about people not wearing masks. This is about people being responsible and safe. I would ask the mayor, how are you going to enforce this, Mayor? You have a police department right now that's struggling to maintain law and order, and you're wanting them to go around and check people's masks? Let private enterprise, let people use common sense, and that's how we come out of this.
Congressman, one thing I do like about the speed at which you talk is we can get a lot in a finite amount of time. Good to talk to you this morning.
It's always good to talk with you. Take care.
All right. Julie?
The soon-to-be renamed Washington Redskins are facing a whole new controversy after 15 women claimed they were sexually harassed while working for the organization. We've got more on what else they had to say in a new bombshell report. Plus, rising crime in Chicago, sparking a war of words between the mayor and the White House press secretary. Guy Benson joins us on all of that next.
With enforcement, and that's taking place in the areas that we're responsible for. We want others to call us to help. There's nothing wrong. Let Chicago call.
Non sequiturs on those, when he's on them. Sometimes it's Vice President Pence, and we can engage in a more meaningful discussion. But yeah, when it's not a question of availability. I can reach the Vice President and President when I need to. It's really the follow through, and it's not living up to the promises that they made to the states, and the continued lack of a coordinated approach. Meaning, how do we deal with the fact that people move between our states every day? Colorado's a landlocked state. We have between 50 and 100,000 visitors from Arizona, Texas, and California over 4th of July weekend. That's part of the reason that we're seeing an uptick now. And we really need to approach this in a nationally coordinated way.
Then is there any way to enforce this, right? We do hear that we're going to enforce quarantines if people are coming from state to state. But unless we're doing it at airports, when people are just in cars driving across state lines, is there anything happening to track people's moves?
No, states don't have the ability or the power or the authority in the U.S. Constitution. We're a nation, we're a free country. We don't even know who comes in and out, right? You can drive up from New Mexico, Nebraska, all the states that we border. We're landlocked. and the state of Colorado or the country wouldn't know you're here. There's no registry for when you're visiting your friends or family in other states, nor should there be. That's why we need a national strategy that really looks at us as one unit, rather than leaves 50 units to themselves who don't even have control of their borders.
So it's a gentle request to quarantine. Colorado Governor.
For hometown boy and phone company. Then it's on to Wessington Springs, where leaving the land better is a passion. Finally, we meet a longtime nurse in Burke whose servant heart continues to make a difference. So join us for KELO on the Road, Tuesday, July 28th at 6:30, only on KELOland TV.
Can you blame them? The rubberneckers. After all, those eye-catching updates were your idea, and the experienced crew from ABC Seamless did the rest. Your roof went from neglected to protected. Your siding went from squalid to solid, and that old front door went from drab to fab. Teaming up with ABC gave you the best-looking house on the block. So keep turning heads, homeowner. Just don't let it go to yours.
Halberstad's at the Empire Mall will save you up to 75%. Now, during this special sales event, style is back in business, and now's the best time to save on designer menswear. For a limited time, only at Halberstad's at the Empire Mall.
As coronavirus cases surge in the U.S., Latino communities are suffering high rates of infections. The CDC says Latinos are hospitalized from the virus at more than 4 times the rate of white Americans. The CBS News special Pandemia, Latinos in Crisis, looks at why this community is vulnerable and shares the stories of people on the front lines. In this preview, Ed O'Keefe talks to New York State Assembly member Catalina Cruz about stepping up to help her hard-hit community.
We are the epicenter of the epicenter. Ponte la máscara, mi amor.
For many across the country, the last 3 months
Do you realize how many children are on the line?
have upended their lives.
That means their parents probably have to go back to work.
So they sent the kids to pick it up.
Because I didn't have this many kids on the line before.
And Latino leaders
How many?
are rushing to help.
You have a microwave? Okay.
Based in Queens, New York, Catalina Cruz, a Colombian immigrant, is the first dreamer to serve in the New York State Assembly.
Hoy sí vino temprano. Eso. Conóceme más, mi amor. These are really kind people who will get to the end of the line and we have no more food, and they have 4 meals, and they'll turn around and give 2 to the person behind them.
She's an angel in this neighborhood. Her constituents let her know when they like her. I wanted she to be a mayor. And when they don't.
She does many good things. No. She does for illegals, not the people that live here. You see what I mean?
By the morning of March 17th, 5 days before New York was ordered to stay home, Assemblywoman Catalina Cruz's district office became a food pantry.
So, this is where we have the food set up, and we start giving it out, and we kind of...
Today, her team gives out at least 2,000 meals a day.
Buenas.
Every day, the line wraps around the block. What's going through your head as you walk the line?
That could have been me and my mom. That had I not become one of the lucky ones, I'd be on a line with my mom.
Well, what does it say that in the nation's largest city, allegedly the financial center of the country and of the world, an assemblywoman has to do this for her constituents?
When it came time to help my people, they left us alone. They left us alone. I had lines of people. There were like 2,000.
Assemblywoman Catalina Cruz, who is an angel in her neighborhood. Maria Elena Salinas will anchor this special airing Sunday. She's with us from Miami. Maria Elena, good morning.
Both parents work. What about federal funding? The threat from the president and the education secretary to withhold federal funding if your schools don't fully reopen. Do you know if you're going to get the money if you're not physically open by August 24th?
Well, we certainly hope that that's not the case. I mean, look, we are a poor community. Regardless of what people see on TV, you know, Miami-Dade is not South Beach. 73.4% of the children in our community are poor. 11% of them have disabilities. About 50,000 of them are English language learners. You know, imposing an additional crisis, a financial crisis, upon children who are fragile to begin with just does not make any sense whatsoever. What I'm actually asking for is some degree of flexibility. Look, different parts of America are experiencing different levels of proportionality regarding COVID-19. We are in crisis mode right here in our community. So we ought to be given some degree of flexibility to restart the school year, but in a way that's safe for students and parents and teachers.
I'd like to talk about the children you just mentioned. I mean, among the most vulnerable populations, you've got 70%, over 70% of the students in your schools rely on free lunch. And,
Right.
You talk about not just food insecurity, but about, all of the other challenges that they face. We also know many of those children face an increased burden of not having complete broadband access, Wi-Fi access, their own laptop to get the work done at home. And we know what the numbers have shown in terms of the impact on many of those children from schools being closed in March. What is the plan, right? Can you assure every family, every parent in your district that they will have the broadband access they need, they will have a computer to really have an equal shot at an online education?
All right, therein lies the Hobson's choice, right? You want to protect the health and well-being of children and teachers, but at the same time you want to sort of put a stop to the learning loss, the academic regression that they're facing. In the last quarter of last school year, because of our level of readiness, we actually reached 100% connectivity for students, with every single student in Miami-Dade with a portable device connected from home.
But I hear that is, let me just jump in and say that's amazing, good for you. But does your data show that since schools closed in March, they were all logged on consistently and taking the classes?
So they were logged on. What we did observe were some challenges with, quite frankly, students not only being logged on, but actually learning consistently in a continuous manner. That's why right now we're doing massive professional development for our employees, but also as a board priority, training for parents to be better supporters of a home learning environment for children. So our problem is not a technology problem. Our problem, quite frankly, is that there's no guarantee that depending on the personal circumstances of parents, work demand of parents, that there will be the necessary support at home.
Yeah. It's impossible for, many quote-unquote essential workers that will not get paid if they don't leave the home to go to serve people and to do their job, and then how can they be there for their kids? It's an impossible situation. We wish you a lot of luck. Thank you, Superintendent Carvalho.
Thank you very much.
Of course. Texas Governor Greg Abbott.
And we do look for severe storms firing up in the plains, hot and humid in the central plains, some wet weather in the northeast, heavy rain through the Appalachians. Look for some scattered showers through Florida and on into eastern Texas. That's what's going on around the country. Here's what's happening in your neck of the woods.
It is a warm and muggy start to our day, and it's going to be a hot and humid one later on this afternoon. Lots of us are already well into the 70s across the region, and we're just going to be seeing temperatures continue to rise here as we go through the rest of today.
7.5% to 1% of that mortgage rate, and be sure that you look and understand the fees, because those can creep up on you and make it not worth your while. Cecilia? Becca Jarvis, you always have the best advice for us. Thank you so much, my friend. Tom, over to you.
Yeah, a lot of great tips there. Now,
It was a mess too. Mayor de Blasio is accused of doing nothing to protect our police. We've seen a rise in the shooting deaths of children as well, including a 1-year-old that Laura Ingle just reported earlier. Enough is enough. We need our streets back. We want our streets back. We have to get our streets back. And clearly these mayors, whether it's Chicago, whether it's New York City, the Chicago mayor says that they're a punching bag for the president. That's not true. The president has pointed out that New York City is a mess, and there are many other cities as well. So at what point, if this does not improve, do the feds step in and finally clean up what these mayors are clearly incapable of doing?
Well, and you mentioned this term punching bag. Sure, sometimes you'll see people pointing out the problems in Chicago. Maybe that's not always done in good faith, but you have to put that off to the side and look at the actual results. It's a shooting gallery in that city. And by the way, for years it was like, oh, well, the violence is mostly drug and gang related in a very specific part of the city, as if that's an excuse. But we've seen some of the violence seeping into other parts of Chicago as well, and I know the city's not eager to talk about that. But you're right, Julie, New York City, other major cities, Minneapolis, other places have seen a spike in crime. I'm all in favor of police reform. I've been very consistent about that. But demeaning the police across the board, attacking the police, that's not a solution. And another non-solution is Democratic mayors who are failing going on Twitter and attacking the president or the White House. That might get them some applause from certain quarters, but it's not going to save lives.
No, it's not. Go ahead.
It's being done nationwide and specifically in Texas for Operation Connectivity. Excited about the partnerships that we have with our local officials as well as our mayor and our county, because that is a priority for us, recognizing that in order for us to continue for our students to learn at home, they have to have the equipment necessary in order to do that at home as well.
We got to get connected. Thank you so much for joining me, and thanks for all the work that you are doing. We're going to leave it there. Next, this fight over masks in Georgia. Think about this.
The latest on the sexual harassment allegations against Washington's NFL team. We've got former Washington Post beat writer Jason Reed of The Undefeated. He's going to share his insights with us about this bombshell story. That's coming up next on Get Up.
Parts which would be legal to buying a home, they say cash is king. Black people make
unnecessary. The camps run through August 14th. To learn more about Leif Erikson Day Camp and how to get your kids signed up, we've provided a link to its website under this story at KELOland.com. Let's go check on our weather forecast now. Here's meteorologist Scott Munt.
All right, good morning, Matt. Good morning, KELOland. We are following heat index.
We're back after your local news, your weather, and a check of these messages.
Don't worry. Tom?
Sounds like a powerful show tonight. All right, Deborah, thank you. The 2020 event In the Cold Dark Night airs tonight at 9/8 Central.
So glad we got it online.
Through the cracks or falls through the social safety net.
And going on in education because of this situation.
Could you afford thousands and thousands of experience after medical?
Couch, and I'm like, what the hell? And then, you know, he like got up and, oh, we're good, and go.
The Gullfoss waterfall in Iceland.
North Dakota, that will spark severe storms, and some of those severe storms will move into north central and northeastern KELOland during the late evening hours. That's futurecast at 9 o'clock, and they will continue to move to the east and slightly to the southeast as we go through the late evening hours and into the
I think the real question is, these dire warnings from medical experts within the state, are those going to cause the governor to reverse course? Because he keeps saying masks will solve it. We are not, closing down again. We are not shutting down the economy again.
Right. I don't see, based on what the...
At least Geico makes bundling our...
but then, additionally, as you said, there are parts of a breakdown which are...
Begin this half hour. We're just coming up on 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Let's begin this half hour with the scandal in D.C. This is an incredible story. It was a story published by the Washington Post. 15 former female employees of the Washington football team and 2 female reporters have accused members of the team's front office of sexual and verbal assault. Now, the accusations span from 2006 through 2019. They include longtime radio voice Larry Michael, director of pro personnel Alex Santos, and his assistant Richard Mann, all members of owner Daniel Snyder's inner circle. All 3 suddenly departed the organization within the past week. Now, Snyder and former longtime general manager Bruce Allen have not been accused of harassment, but some of the women said it was unlikely that Snyder and Allen didn't know about the behavior. The team has hired a D.C. attorney to review their culture and the allegations of workplace misconduct. And one of the accusers, Emily Applegate, she spoke out about the culture.
I had a, week maybe or so that was great. And I was like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted and what was explained to me. And this is going to be great. And then, you get your first, screaming at you for something that it's not your fault, and then somebody makes a comment to you about what you're wearing, and it just snowballs from there. And it really took most people no time to comment on my appearance.
Now, Snyder has had no comment to this, but head coach Ron Rivera, who was hired this offseason, he sent this text to ESPN reporter John Kime. Biggest thing is that we have to move forward from this and make sure everybody understands we have policies that we will follow and that we have an open door policy with no retribution. Plus, my daughter works for the team, and I am sure as hell not going to allow any of this. Okay, so for more, let's bring in Jeff Darlington. Jeff, you've been in and around this team. You've been to the facility scores of times. What's your reaction given to what you've seen from this team?
Well, look, Ryan, I've spent time at every single facility across the league many times over, and I can tell you, the Washington organization has always felt different in the sense that the class system that has always existed there, when it comes to Dan Snyder and his sort of crew and his squad beneath him, and then everybody else, there is a clear delineation. And having conversations over the years with dozens of employees, dozens of people, they certainly sense that. Now, that does not speak to the allegations that are being reported by the Washington Post when it comes to the sexual harassment, but it certainly does speak to the culture that has long existed when it comes to local media, when it comes to lower level employees, when it comes to all of those factors. This has been something that has been dominant over the culture of the organization. Ron Rivera, one of the most respected people in the NFL, certainly the type of person who can change that. But it's still Dan Snyder's organization, and we'll have to see how he responds and what kind of changes he makes before we'll believe any changes are on the horizon.
Yeah, and Jeff Darlington, so far no response from Dan Snyder. We'll see if that changes today. I want to welcome in now ESPN NFL reporter Kimberly Martin, also Damian Woody, Dominic Foxworth. And Kimberly, I want to start with you. You know, for days we had been hearing that there was going to be a very big story coming out about the Washington football team. Now this comes. And Kimberly, I have to say, this is about as alarming as it gets when you talk about the treatment of women within the organization.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I wasn't surprised when I read it. We all knew something was coming, and we heard rumors about it. But as somebody who worked for the Washington Post, who was a beat writer covering this team, as somebody who spent over a decade covering NFL teams, this was not surprising. And it pains me to say that, because what was described in that article was disgusting. There's no place for that for any woman to feel that she can't just do her job and she has to deal with unwanted attention or remarks. And that's the reality for these former employees of the Washington football team, and also for a lot of journalists like myself covering the NFL.
You know, a couple of notes here. I'll just read you something that just came in from the Speaker's office. She describes John Lewis as, quote, a titan of the civil rights movement. She says every day of John Lewis's life was dedicated to bringing freedom and justice to all. And she goes on to talk about this annual pilgrimage that Lewis would lead to the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Alabama, where his skull was beaten. He has a steel plate in his head from being beaten by the Alabama State Police back on Bloody Sunday back in the 1960s. And over the years, you had Democratic members and Republican members who would go on this pilgrimage to the Edmund Pettus Bridge and walk across the bridge symbolically. You know, the thing I remember about John Lewis most significantly was after the Pulse nightclub shooting in the summer of 2016. He, you know, was known for, quote, nonviolent protest. And so he and John Larson, Democratic congressman from Connecticut, they went down and sat on the actual floor in the House chamber for more than 24 hours, a sit-in, like they used to do back in the 60s at these lunch counters. You know, he was arrested more than 40 times. You know, he was the head of the SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Organizing Committee back in the 1960s, and held this sit-in to protest gun violence and urge then the Republican majority in the House of Representatives to do something about gunplay and the scourge in the United States. I mean, so, you know, he was still well into his congressional career. He was first elected to the House of Representatives.
Appearances during anniversaries, even showed up at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where he marched and had his skull broken by white police officers during that march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. He was a leader for the civil rights group called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. One of the key participants in the 1965 civil rights protests pushing for voting rights from Selma to Alabama's capital, Montgomery.